the people were so welcoming, and as he got to know you more, he would tell us about the incredible stories, your life stories you have. Everybody is just so interesting and has so much to tell, and he just really enjoyed that part of it. So I want to thank you all, and I want to thank the management at Aberdeen. Is Tim here?
Yes, he was.
Tim, come up here real quick. We wanted to do something nice for Aberdeen because we just really feel like you really helped make a good last 6 or 7 years for Dad. And so we have a... Over there. No. We did one of his prints and framed it for you. And hopefully you'll find a nice place to put it. So, We truly, all of us, truly thank you for everything you did. Now, we're so happy that Bill Walters has volunteered to say a few words for us. He's a very eloquent speaker and became really good friends with Dad, so I think this should be very appropriate for him. Thanks again for coming.
Thank you, Susan, and to all of you who have come here this morning, thank you for coming and sharing in this time. You know, when our activities director put up the posters, she put on it that I would be saying a few words. The many of you have speculated what a few words really is. But I can assure you that a few words is precisely what I'm going to say today. So we'll just keep that in mind. It's a real privilege for me to have this opportunity to participate in this celebration of Omar's life. We are here today to remember his many accomplishments and to remember his life, particularly with us who are here at Aberdeen Village. A more formal memorial service, a witness to the resurrection, will be held in his hometown of Larned later on. Now, like most of you here, I did not know Omar until he moved into Aberdeen Village almost 9 years ago. You may not know it, but Susan has already alluded to it. He was a man with many talents. He was an author, among other things. And just a year or so ago, he wrote a book called No More Homemade Butter, with a subtitle of And Other Memories and Musings of a Kansas Farmer, Inventor, Painter, Artist, and Writer. And in this book, he recorded many of the things that he remembered over his past years. And I want to share with you just one brief passage that when I read it, it almost made tears come to my eyes. He had just moved to Aberdeen, and he wrote this of that experience. He said, one of the first people I met was a retired preacher who grew up on a ranch in eastern Colorado. Bill Walter is a self-appointed ambassador for Aberdeen Village. He seems to be the first to greet newcomers. He quickly found out that I painted. He had taken up painting when he and his wife retired to Aberdeen Village. Then he went on to discuss how he had become involved in the Artist Ageless program with my encouragement. And you know, it was not only a few years later that his name, the name of Omar Schartz, was familiar to many people throughout the Presbyterian Manners of Mid-America system. Now, I want to tell you this, that I have done nothing out of the ordinary, nothing that any of you would have done. But this illustrates so well, I think, that it was those little things, those simple acts that were so important to Omar. That was the beginning of a friendship that I deeply treasure. I soon discovered that Omar and I had many things in common. We were both raised on a farm. He near Larned, Kansas, and I near La Hunter, Colorado. We knew what it was to work long hours on the farm, plowing the fields, planting, cultivating, harvesting the crops. We both knew how to hitch up a team of horses or to drive an early model of a tractor and use machinery that today is considered to be antique. There were those ever-present chores to do, although we may not have thought about this in theological terms. I think that we thought of ourselves as sort of co-creators with God and sustainers, taking care of this vast creation which God had brought into being. And I suspect that at times, young boys like us, teenagers, would probably prefer to have God taken on a little more of that caring for time. And slow down and take the time to rest, like that young fellow that he was to show in one of his many paintings. There were other events in our lives that were somewhat similar. He took advantage of overhead sprinkling system so that he could irrigate his crops of maize. I studied about irrigation systems in college, and during my brief career as a civil engineer, I worked in that area before turning to the ministry. He fed and sold cattle. My family was for many years and still is involved in the cattle industry. We both engaged in drawing sketches in our more youthful days. He once told me that he would draw caricatures of his teachers in his textbook. And he knew that he could avoid any kind of punishment until the books were turned in at the end of the school year. Now, I don't think I had the courage to do that. My interest in producing art was put on the back burner where it was to remain for many years. Omar, in the meantime, continued to farm and work with his cattle, do the other things that he did. It's a well-known fact that few artists can survive by selling their artwork. And Omar had more pressing responsibility, that of providing for his wife Jewel and the 6 children that were to later be added to the family. Only later did he take the time off from his work to paint. He never sold his paintings as far as I know, but he did give some to family members and friends. And fortunately for us here at Aberdeen, he kept some to share with us here. You know, we've had a lot of good work in our gallery out here over the years since it was established. But the art that has brought me the greatest sense of joy or fulfillment, whatever, is the art that was produced by Omar and exhibited just recently in our gallery. Not because it was of its quality, which was very good, but because of who it was that created it. Someone that I knew as a friend. What he had done over the past 50 years, creating on canvas this world in which he had experienced so many great things, this world that he loved. And I want to insert just a word here, and this particularly applies to those who are residents. Many of you saw Omar during that time of his exhibit in the hallway or in the village green. And many of you told him how much you appreciated perhaps a piece of his work, or the whole exhibit. And you could never know the good that you did by those few words. For this was an affirmation of what Omar had done over those last 50 years. He had created something that would live on forever in the hearts of people who knew him. And I want to thank all of you for doing that. I suppose that each one of you had your favorite painting among those that were hanging in the gallery. Now, Ed Cochran liked the Indian Duman liked the Indian paintings. Others liked Moses, Grandma, Nellie, quilting, others. I liked them all, but there was one in particular that captured my attention. It was the one that was hanging out there by the library window, that long painting called The Last Harvest. Now, I have no idea what message Omar may have had in mind when he painted that picture. I suspect that it was a way of celebrating the fact that after a long, hot summer of caring for the fields of Milo maize, the time had come to bring its story to an end. He was the driver's seat in that giant piece of machinery, moving from field to field, and now the end is near. Just a few more feet. It was late in the day, getting dark. The lights were turned on in that giant combine so that they could shine on those rows of maize and almost at the end of the row. And all that grain was safely tucked away in the granary. Right there, just ahead, the harvest is over. I can rest now. My work is done. All is well. You know, my friends, life is much like that for all of us, isn't it? Particularly those of us who are older. We've planted the seeds along the pathway of our lives. We've fed and watered the plants. And then the end comes. The harvest of our labors throughout the years is over. The sun is setting. Our days are soon gone. And one day we will hear that call that Omar has heard. Well done, my good and faithful servant. Come to me, and I will give you rest. All is well for Omar Schartz. I am confident of that. And by the grace of a compassionate God, all shall be well with us. Amen.